Okay, so in this video we're going to read and discuss the first three chapters of Pliny's famous letter 616 to Tacitus concerning the death of his uncle, which the modern reader doesn't focus as much as the death of his uncle as the events of that death, which of course is the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. 616 represents the fact that the letters of Pliny by himself were collected in a series of 10 books, and each book has X amount of letters, and so this is the 16th letter in the 6th book that he himself had compiled. So let's go ahead and get started. So it starts out with the way, obviously, letters in the Roman style are going to be written. You put in the nominative, the person who's writing the letter, Gaius Plinius, and then that S is going to stand for Salutem Dicit, but obviously all the part that I just put in parentheses is left out and is just abbreviated as the F. So says greetings to, in the dative case, the recipient of this letter, his own Tacitus. Tacitus is an incredibly famous Roman historian, and Pliny and Tacitus were best buds, and so therefore he is writing to him that letter. So you seek from the verb peto, petre, petivi, petitus, ut, that. This word, petis, is a commandy word. And so what we have right off the bat is obviously a subjunctive, because this scribam is going to have the vowel A. We fear a giant liar from the noun, or I should say from the verb scriba, scribere. If I were to write scribam by itself, scribam, outside of context, it would actually be two words. One is that it could be, as it is here, the present subjunctive with that vowel A, or we all know from the equation E plus M turns into AM, it could be future. So here it is either I will write, or subjunctively in let me write, or I would write, some sort of subjunctive helping verb. But here in the context of the ut clause, we know that it is the present subjunctive in an indirect command. That I write the exit, i.e. the death of my uncle, to you. And so therefore we learn right off of the bat in the very first clause, two clauses, that Tacitus has requested that he, Pliny, his friend, write to him about the death of his uncle, so that Tacitus then can obviously write it up in a formal history. This is merely a letter from one friend to the other. By which, from qui qua quote. Now this is the equivalency of an ut clause. That would be a purpose clause. This, of course, is often done with a comparative. And verum, or vero, is truly, verius is going to be more truly. And so therefore, that I write the death of my uncle to you, so that, or by which, more truly, you are able. This is the subjunctive from sum esse fui futurus, which of course is sim, sis, sit, simis, sitis, sint. More truly, you are able to hand it off, i.e. the story of his death, to those that come after, i.e. to posterity, the things in the future, or the people in the future more so. He then says, ago gratias, I drive thanks. In other words, I give you thanks. That is the way in Latin in which you would usually say, thank you. For I see that. Here we are going to have a verb of mental action that is then going to have an accusative subject, immortalem gloriam, and then your verb, which is the infinitive, is esse propositam, from propono proponere. For I see that the immortal glory of his death has been put out there. Pono ponere means obviously to put, and so this means to propose or to be put out there. In other words, make more widely known. And so therefore, I see that the immortal glory of his death has been put out there. Remember that we are starting with AO in the mental action present, and the infinitive, which is a perfect passive infinitive, is going to indicate action before, and so has been put out there. And then we have here the protasis of a conditional statement. This conditional statement has a present subjunctive. This is celebro, celebrare, which means to celebrate. And as we fear a giant liar, it is going to be a future less vivid protasis, which of course we know that future less vivid conditionals are always translated if the subject should verb at some point in the future, then the other subject or the same subject would verb. And so here we're going to translate it with the English word should, since it is the protasis. And so, if he should be celebrated, if he should be obviously dealt with, written about by you, then of course I see that his immortal glory has been put out there, or has been obviously made more widely available. Quamvis. Quamvis is the equivalency of a cum when it is an adversative clause with a subjunctive verb, which is what we have here in the perfect subjunctive. This verb, okita, okitere, means to fall or to die. And of course it has the subjunctive endings, erim, eris, erit. So, although, because that's what quamvis means, the equivalency of this were the cum clause that would have a tom in, but there's not because we're using quamvis. For although he died, he did die, he has died, a perfect subjunctive, in the disaster. This is of course the noun clades, cladis, which means disaster or misfortune. In the disaster, by, with, because of, from, in, on, at, of the most beautiful lands. The Bay of Naples is absolutely stunning, and especially the south of the Bay of Naples, the Amalfi coastline, most beautiful place on earth. For although he died in the disaster of the most beautiful lands, ut, whenever there is not a subjunctive, and there's no verb at all, you will translate the ut as the populations, the peoples, died, and as the cities, also implied died, in the memorable downfall, in the memorable disaster. This is the fourth declension, in which you would take the fourth principal part of a verb, kado, kadere, kikidi, kasus, and turn it into a fourth declension noun, kasus, kasus, and so it means the act of falling down, the downfall, the disaster, the misfortune. And so although he died in the disaster of those very most beautiful lands as the peoples and as the cities in the memorable disaster, he died as if, that's what quasi means, always about to live. This is essentially indicating that he did not expect that it would be his end. He did not expect that this was something that he was going into in this situation that would lead to his death. He never expected it. And so therefore, always as if about to live, a future active participle. And although he himself has established from the verb condo, condere, conditi, conditus, not many, that would be multa, not more, that would be plura, this is plurima, a superlative, and although he himself has established very many works, and works about to remain. In other words, he is an author himself of stuff that indeed was prodigious. He was writer of very many works, a scientific writer, and the Mansura, about to remain, indicates that they're lasting works. They're works that are going to be obviously cherished by generations to come. So he already has his own reputation as a writer. And so although he himself has established very many works, and works about to remain, however, the aeternitas, this is the nominative. Take off the A and replace the AS in the nominative, danger, danger, because it looks as though it could be first declension, but it's not, it's third. The eternity tuorum scriptorum of your writings will add, auto, audere, this is a long E and a third conjugation, will add much to the perpetuity of him, to his perpetuity. In other words, he doesn't need necessarily Tacitus to write about him to ensure that his memory will last for generations to come. He himself is already an established writer. However, in this little bit of faux flattery, what Pliny is saying to Tacitus is that if you write about him additionally to his own works, then truly his memory will be everlasting and his greatness will be known widespread by all. Continuing on, equidem, which is the same merely as quidem, which means indeed, but that e is actually short for ego, quidem. And so therefore, indeed, I think the people implied them blessed. This is where we get the English word beatitude, as in the famous Sermon from the Mount.
Good morning, Scott. High School. It is a great day to be an Eagle. Time for our walk-up song of the...
Okay, sorry about that interruption. It was the morning announcements at the first thing. So, continuing in chapter 3. Indeed, I think those people implied them blessed. I think people blessed. And this word could also mean beautiful, and obviously that's where we get the word beautiful. Those for whom, by gift of the gods, munus muneris, which of course is literally going to mean muneris. is a gift or a service. However, this is the word that when you put it in the nominative plural, munera, means actually gladiatorial combat. But in this obvious context, it is obviously going to mean gift or service. It's where we get the English word remuneration. Remuneration is essentially the salary that I am paid for my service. It is the gift that is given to me for my work that I do in my job. So, I think I have the opinion that they are blessed. I think them blessed, for whom by gift of the gods it, do dari dedidatus, has been given, either to make things about to be written, i.e., to do things so worthy that other people write about them. In other words, the doers of the world. So either to do things or to make things about to be written about because they are so great in their actions, or to write things about to be read. So in other words, to be a doer of the world or to be a writer in the world about those. And so therefore he's saying, is Pliny, that the people who either do that, the doers of the world, or either do that, the writers of the world, are blessed. But then he qualifies it. Whereof, truly, I think that they are most blessed, the superlative, not just fortunate, for whom utrumque, from the Latin word uterque, utrumque, or uterque, utraque, utrumque, and here it means each. In other words, find you an uncle like I have who can do both, who is a great doer of deeds in life and also a great writer in life. And that is his uncle. And that's what he says immediately thereafter. In the number of these guys, i.e. those that can do both, the most blessed ones, my uncle will be. In other words, will be considered, will be that kind of guy, both a doer and a writer. And he says, why? Both and. Both by his own works, his own books, and by yours. And so by his own reputation as the author of the Historia Naturalis, among so many other works that we have, many of which are no longer extant, and when you celebrate him in your histories, he is truly going to be seen among those that are considered, at least by me, but by everybody presumably, the most blessed, because he is both a doer of things about to be written and a writer of things about to be read. Quo libentias sescipio. By which, or because of this fact that he is going to be celebrated by you, because of the fact that he is both a doer and a writer, so because of this, because of which, I undertake this request of yours more gladly. Libenter, from some chapter in Ecce Romani that we had read, I think it may be chapter 36-ish or so, means gladly, but here it is more gladly, I undertake this command, and even do I demand it. In other words, I demand of myself that I give you the story of his death. I demand that which you enjoin. To enjoin means to request or to demand. And so therefore, he's saying, you demanded it of me, and therefore I demand it, implied of myself. So again, by which or because of which I undertake this more gladly, this delivering you his story of his death, and I even demand that thing which you enjoin. I demand that I do the thing that you enjoin, i.e. request. And so therefore, in the first 3 chapters, he sets up what he is doing, why he is writing about the death of his uncle. It has been requested by Tacitus, and how he's so glad to do this request of giving the story of his uncle's death, so that Tacitus can then take it up and write about it in a formal history, thereby even celebrating and thereby even making more famous his great uncle, because his uncle is a guy who can do both. Does great deeds that deserve to be written about, and himself is a contributing author and writes about things that must be read. Thanks. More chapters to follow.